200 years after finding the archive, humanity had transformed itself beyond recognition. Fleet Marshal Taeyong Song walked through the construction yards of New Horizon Station, watching thousands of workers and automated systems building the ships that would carry humanity back to the galaxy. He was 71 years old but looked 50, thanks to medical advances developed during the long years in the void. The ship taking shape before him was beautiful and terrible. The Liberator was 3 kilometers long, its hull made of materials that could absorb energy weapons and redirect the power to its own systems. Its weapons could strike targets from light years away with perfect accuracy. It was just one of 10,000 similar ships being built across humanity's scattered stations. Beside Taeyong walked Counselor Yuna Han, the elected leader of humanity's civilian government. She looked troubled as she surveyed the military buildup. "Do we really need this many warships?" she asked quietly. "We could use these resources to improve life on our stations, to expand our habitats. We've built something good here in the void, Taeyong. Why risk it all?" Taeyong had expected this conversation. Yuna represented a growing faction of humans who had been born in the void and knew no other home. To them, the Milky Way was just a story, and the idea of returning seemed unnecessarily dangerous. "Because it's not about us anymore," Taeyong replied. "Captain Jiho's reconnaissance missions have brought back troubling information. The galaxy is dying, Yuna. The Council's fear of change has made them enforce strict limits on every species under their control. No one is allowed to develop advanced AI. Genetic engineering is forbidden. Even basic research into certain technologies is banned. They're strangling progress across the entire galaxy." Yuna frowned. "That's their problem, not ours." "Is it?" Taeyong stopped walking and turned to face her. 3 months ago, Jiho reported that a species called the Velkar were about to be exiled. Their crime? They developed artificial intelligence to help manage their cities. The Council deemed them too dangerous and ordered their exile. Yuna, there are children in those evacuation ships, families being torn apart. Does that sound familiar? He saw her expression change. Everyone knew the stories of the original exile, passed down through generations. The chaos, the fear, the millions who died in the crossing because they couldn't prepare properly. It was humanity's deepest trauma. "The Velkar aren't our responsibility," Yuna said, but her voice was weaker now. "Then whose responsibility are they? We're the only ones with the power to stop this. We're the only ones who escaped the void and grew strong enough to challenge the Council." Taeyong gestured at the ship being built. "These weapons aren't for conquest. They're for liberation. We're not going back to rule the galaxy. We're going back to free it." Before Yuna could respond, an alarm sounded. Taeyong's communication device activated. Captain Jiho Shin's face appeared on the small screen and she looked shaken. "Marshal, we have a situation. I just returned from the Velkar evacuation zone. You need to see this footage immediately." Taeyong and Yuna hurried to the nearest command center. Within minutes, they were watching Jiho's recorded transmission. The images showed Velkar families being forcibly separated at Council checkpoints. Children were being taken from parents who were deemed too infected by dangerous ideology to be allowed to evacuate together. The Velkar were a species that looked somewhat like Earth's otters, covered in sleek fur with large expressive eyes. In the footage, those eyes were filled with terror and desperation. One scene showed a Velkar mother clinging to her child as Council enforcers tried to pull them apart. Her cries didn't need translation. The sound of a parent's anguish was universal. Yuna's hand covered her mouth. Tears ran down her face. "They're just babies," she whispered. Taeyong felt his own eyes burning. He had 3 grandchildren living on distant stations. The thought of them being torn away from their parents was unbearable. "The Council is getting worse," Jiho said from the recording. "They're not just exiling species anymore. They're breaking them apart first, destroying their social bonds, making sure they'll never be strong enough to threaten the Council, even if they survive in the void. This is genocide with extra steps." The recording ended. The command center was silent except for the soft hum of machinery. Yuna stood slowly. Her face had changed. The doubt was gone, replaced by cold determination. "How long until the fleet is ready?" "At current construction rates, 50 years, Taeyong replied. "But we could accelerate the timeline if we dedicate more resources." "Do it. Whatever you need." Yuna wiped her eyes. "But I have conditions. When we return, we don't become what we're fighting against. No unnecessary casualties. No civilian targets. We demonstrate our strength, but we don't slaughter those who can't fight back." "Agreed. Agreed." Taeyong felt relief wash over him. Having civilian government support was crucial. This couldn't be just a military operation. Over the next 50 years, humanity poured everything into preparation. The construction yards worked around the clock. Scientists refined their technology, making each system more efficient, more powerful. The fold drives were perfected, allowing ships to appear anywhere in the galaxy instantly. Shields were developed that could absorb ridiculous amounts of damage. Weapons systems were designed to disable rather than destroy, capable of taking down military targets while leaving everything around them untouched. But the most important work happened in schools and training centers across humanity's stations. Every person who would be part of the return fleet underwent extensive ethical training. They studied Earth's history, learning about the mistakes humanity had made in its violent past. They learned about empathy, about mercy, about the difference between strength and cruelty. Captain Jiho led many of these training sessions herself. She had spent decades sneaking back into the galaxy, observing the Council's actions, and her experiences had shaped her views. The Council exiled us because they feared we were too violent, she told a class of young officers. They were right to see that potential in us. Humans are capable of great violence, but we're also capable of great compassion. The question isn't whether we're dangerous, it's what we choose to do with that danger. We're going back to the galaxy as warriors, yes, but our war is against tyranny, not against people. Remember that when the time comes. Fleet Marshal Taeyong spent his final years before the launch coordinating every detail of Operation Homecoming. The plan was complex, involving simultaneous strikes across the galaxy. The goal was to demonstrate humanity's overwhelming technological advantage while causing minimal casualties. It had to be clear that humanity could destroy the Council if it chose to, but that it was choosing mercy instead. On the day before the fleet was scheduled to depart, Taeyong stood again in the observation deck where this had all begun 2 centuries ago. Admiral Minho Kang had stood in this same spot when humanity first decided to return. Minho was long dead now, but his vision was about to become reality. Counselor Yuna joined him. She was elderly now, serving her final term before retirement. "Are you afraid?" she asked. "Terrified," Taeyong admitted. "We're about to challenge a government that has ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years. We could fail. We could die. We could become the very thing we're trying to stop. But we're going anyway. Yes, because someone has to." Taeyong looked at the distant glow of the Milky Way. After 700 years, humanity was finally going home. Tomorrow we find out if we've learned anything from our exile. We find out if we're truly different from the Council. We find out if mercy and strength can coexist. Yuna smiled. "I think we already know the answer. We just have to show the rest of the galaxy." The next day, 10,000 ships activated their fold drives simultaneously. The void that had been humanity's home for 7 centuries suddenly felt empty. The Armada had departed, carrying 300 billion souls' hopes with them. In the Milky Way galaxy, the Galactic Council continued their deliberations, completely unaware that the species they had exiled so long ago was about to knock on their door. And this time humanity wasn't asking for permission to enter. They were coming home, and nothing in the galaxy could stop them. 500 years had passed since the great ships left the Milky Way behind. Admiral Minho Kang stood on the observation deck of the eternal horizon, staring at the absolute darkness that surrounded them. Out here, between galaxies, there were no stars close enough to see with the naked eye. The Milky Way was a distant spiral of light behind them, and Andromeda glowed faintly ahead. Everything else was void. Minho was 43 years old, but the weight on his shoulders made him feel ancient. He was the commander of humanity's largest fleet, responsible for protecting 30 billion souls spread across hundreds of habitat stations floating in the dark. He had been born on one of these stations. His children had been born here. None of them had ever seen Earth except in historical recordings. The stories said Earth was beautiful. Green and blue wrapped in white clouds. Minho wondered if he would ever see it for himself, or if humanity would remain in the dark forever. Behind him the door opened. Engineer Sora Kim entered, her eyes bright with excitement that contrasted sharply with the exhaustion visible on her face. She had been working for 72 hours straight, barely stopping to eat or sleep. "Admiral, we did it," she said breathlessly. "The fold drive works." "The tests were successful." Minho turned to face her. "You're certain?" "Completely. We can now travel instantaneously across distances that would take years even with our fastest conventional drives. The theoretical maximum range is unlimited. Sora's hands moved as she spoke, gesturing enthusiastically. This changes everything. We can explore the entire region around us. We're not trapped anymore. For the first time in months, Minho felt something like hope.
How soon can we begin using it?
We can start installing fold drives on exploration vessels immediately. Give me 6 months and we'll have a dozen ships ready to scout the surrounding volume. Minho nodded. Do it. And Sora? This stays classified for now. I don't want to raise hopes until we know what's out there. But Sora's discovery led to something neither of them expected. The exploration vessels, equipped with their new fold drives, began mapping the void systematically. Most of it was empty as expected. Occasional rogue planets drifting between galaxies, clouds of cold gas, nothing of interest until they found the defenses. Captain Junho Nam was commanding the scout ship Pathfinder when his sensors detected something impossible. Massive structures floating in the void, still active after unimaginable ages. They were clearly artificial, built with technology far beyond anything humanity possessed. When Pathfinder approached, the structures powered up, weapon systems activating automatically. Junho ordered an immediate retreat, barely escaping with his ship intact. When he reported back to Minho, his hands were still shaking. They were guarding something, Junho explained, displaying his sensor data. Behind those defenses, there's a structure the size of a small moon. It's giving off faint power readings. Whatever it is, someone wanted it protected. Minho studied the data carefully. What do you think we should do? Junho, who taught galactic history to children on his station when he wasn't flying, leaned forward. I think we need to know what's there. Whoever built those defenses is likely long gone. The systems are automated, running on programming millions of years old. If we can disable them, we might find something valuable. It took 3 years of careful work. Engineers studied the defense systems, learning their patterns, finding their weaknesses. Slowly, methodically, humanity's best minds figured out how to deactivate the ancient guardians without destroying them. When the last defense platform went dark, Minho led an expedition to the structure himself. They called it the Archive. The inside was vast beyond comprehension. Chambers stacked upon chambers, corridors branching into infinity, but it wasn't dead. As soon as humans entered, lights began turning on. Systems that had slept for eons awakened. A voice spoke through their communication systems, translated automatically into perfect English. Welcome, exiles. We have waited long for another species to find us. The exploration team froze. Minho forced himself to speak calmly. Who are you? We are what remains of the progenitors. We no longer exist in physical form, but we left this archive for those who would come after, for those who, like us, were cast out. Over the following weeks, the archive told them its story. The progenitors had been a spacefaring species 3 million years ago. They had encountered the Galactic Council and been judged wanting. They had been exiled to the void just as humanity had been. But the progenitors had not simply survived. They had transcended, evolving beyond physical existence into beings of pure thought and energy. Before they ascended, they left the archive as a gift and a warning to whoever found it. Minho, Sora, and Junho stood in the archive's central chamber as it displayed images of the past. They saw the council as it had been millions of years ago, younger but already set in its ways. They saw 47 different species exiled over the millennia, cast out for being too ambitious, too creative, too dangerous. The council fears change. The archive's voice explained. They have created a stable galaxy, peaceful and orderly, but it is also stagnant. They remove any species that might challenge the established order, calling it protection but truly acting out of fear. They do not understand that growth requires risk. They have chosen safety over progress, and the galaxy has been dying slowly for ages because of it. Junho sat down heavily, processing what they were learning. So we're not the first. We're just the latest in a long line of exiled species. Correct. Most of the exiled species died in the void. A few survived for generations before fading away. Only the progenitors endured long enough to transcend. And now you. Sora asked the question they were all thinking. What happened to the other species the council exiled? The archive showed them burial grounds floating in the dark, dead stations and empty ships, entire civilizations that had withered and died, unable to survive in the harsh environment between galaxies. It was a graveyard of dreams and potential. Minho felt cold anger building in his chest. All these species destroyed not because they were evil but because they were different, because they scared the council. "We have a choice to make," he said quietly. "We can stay here, safe in the void. We've built a good life. We're surviving. Or we can go back." "Go back?" Junior looked at him in surprise. "The council would destroy us. Maybe. Or maybe we've grown strong enough that they can't." Minho gestured at the archive around them. "We have technology they don't. We've learned things in the void that they never could because they're too afraid to take risks. The progenitors transcended, but they left the galaxy behind. What if we could do something they couldn't? What if we could go back and change things?" Sora was already shaking her head. "It's too dangerous. We have families, children. Why risk everything we've built?" "Because they're still doing it," Minho said forcefully. "Right now in the galaxy, the council is probably judging another species. They'll exile them like they exiled us. Like they exiled 47 species before us. How many more will die in the dark before someone stops them?" The three of them stood in silence for a long moment. Finally, Junho spoke. "My grandmother was on one of the original Exodus ships. She used to tell me stories about Earth, about the stars, about how beautiful the galaxy was. She died never seeing home again. If we go back, we could make sure no other species suffers that fate." Sora closed her eyes. "If we do this, it has to be done right. We can't just attack the council. We need to be strong enough that they have no choice but to listen. Strong enough that they can't just exile us again or destroy us." Minho nodded slowly. "Then we prepare. We take our time, do it properly. The council has ruled for 50,000 years. They're not going anywhere. We'll spend the next few centuries building ourselves into something they can't ignore." The archive's voice spoke one last time. "The progenitors learned too late that ascension was not the answer. Evolution is not about leaving the physical world behind. It is about transforming it, making it better. You have the chance to do what we could not. Return to the galaxy, free it from stagnation. Let growth begin again." Minho looked at his companions. "Are we agreed?" Sora straightened her shoulders. "I'll design the ships. If we're going back with technology that will make the council's weapons look like toys." Junho smiled grimly. "And I'll make sure everyone remembers why we were exiled in the first place, so we never make the same mistakes the council did. Power without wisdom is just tyranny." Admiral Minho Kang looked out at the darkness surrounding them and made his decision. Humanity had survived 500 years in the void. They had grown strong in the dark. Now it was time to bring that strength back to the light. "Send a message to all stations," he commanded. "Tell them we've found something incredible. Tell them we have hope again. And tell them to start preparing. One day we're going home." The crystal towers of HFY gleamed like frozen starlight against the black canvas of space. Commander Jiwan Park stood at the observation window of humanity's diplomatic vessel, watching the massive structure grow larger as they approached. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman in her 40s, wearing the crisp uniform of Earth's United Fleet, her face calm despite the nervous energy flowing through her body. This was it. First contact with the Galactic Council, the moment humanity had dreamed about for centuries. Behind her, Dr. Hyun Lee adjusted his datapad for the 100th time. The scientist had barely slept in the 3 days since they received the Council's invitation. His hands trembled slightly as he reviewed their presentation materials again. "We're ready," Jiwon said quietly, though she wasn't sure if she was reassuring Hyun or herself. Young pilot Daehyun Choi guided their ship through the docking sequence with practiced ease. At 26, he was the youngest member of the delegation, chosen because his flying skills were exceptional even by human standards. He flashed a confident grin over his shoulder. "Don't worry, Commander. We've got this." The docking bay doors hissed open and Jiwon led her team into a world beyond imagination. The interior of HFY defied physics as she understood it. Gravity seemed to work in multiple directions at once. Beings of impossible shapes and sizes moved through corridors that bent and twisted through dimensions her eyes struggled to process. There were creatures made of living crystal, floating orbs of pure energy, and things that hurt to look at directly. An escort arrived, a tall being covered in silver fur with too many joints in its limbs. It spoke through a translation device that turned its chittering sounds into flat, emotionless words. "Follow. The council awaits." They were led through winding passages that seemed to change behind them. Finally, they emerged into a vast chamber shaped like the inside of a sphere. Hundreds of beings sat in floating platforms arranged in concentric circles around a central stage. The air hummed with power and age. This was a place where decisions affecting trillions of lives were made. Jiwan walked to the center platform, her team flanking her. She looked up at the assembled council members, feeling incredibly small and young. Some of these beings had been alive for thousands of years. Their civilizations had crossed the stars when humans still lived in caves. A voice boomed through the chamber, translated into perfect English. Humans of Earth, we welcome you to the Galactic Council. You have achieved faster-than-light travel, and thus earned the right to petition for membership. Present your species for evaluation. Hyun stepped forward, projecting holographic images above the platform. He spoke about humanity's achievements, their art and music, their literature and philosophy. He showed them images of Earth's beauty, of children laughing, of communities coming together to help one another. His voice grew stronger as he talked about humanity's potential, their curiosity, their determination to explore and understand the universe. The council listened in silence. When Hyun finished, there was a long pause. Then another voice spoke, colder than the first. Now we will examine your history. New holograms appeared, ones that Hyun hadn't prepared. Images of war filled the space above them. Ancient battles with swords and spears. More recent conflicts with guns and bombs. The mushroom clouds of nuclear weapons. Footage of genocides, of environmental destruction, of species driven to extinction. Ji-won felt her stomach drop. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. We have reviewed your complete historical records, the cold voice continued. Your species has existed for approximately 200,000 years. In that time, you have waged over 15,000 wars. You have driven thousands of species to extinction on your own world. You developed nuclear weapons and immediately used them against your own kind. Even now, as you reach for the stars, your homeworld suffers from pollution and climate disruption caused by your own actions. That's our past, Ji-won interrupted, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. We've learned from those mistakes. We've changed. We have global cooperation now. We've begun healing our planet. We've grown beyond our violent history. Have you? The question hung in the air like a blade. Your species achieved spaceflight only 70 years ago. You developed faster-than-light travel just 5 years past. Yet in those few decades, you have already established military outposts on 12 planets and moons in your system. You carry weapons even now in this sacred chamber of peace. Daehyun's hand instinctively moved to the sidearm at his hip, then froze. Every human in the delegation was armed. It was standard protocol. The cold voice spoke again. The Galactic Council has maintained peace in this galaxy for 50,000 years. We have done so by carefully evaluating each species that reaches for the stars. Some are welcomed. Others are observed and guided until they mature. And some, the most dangerous ones, are removed before they can threaten the stability of galactic civilization. Ji-won's blood ran cold. What are you saying? The Council has reached a verdict. Humanity is too dangerous to integrate into galactic society at this time. Your capacity for violence, your historical patterns of aggression, and your rapid technological advancement without corresponding ethical maturity present an unacceptable risk. The words hit like physical blows. Around the chamber, hundreds of alien faces watched impassively. Therefore, humanity is hereby exiled from the Milky Way galaxy. You have 50 standard years to evacuate all human presence beyond the galactic rim. Any humans found within galactic boundaries after that period will be eliminated. This decision is final and cannot be appealed. No, Hyun stepped forward, his face pale. You can't do this. We came in peace. We want to learn from you, to contribute to galactic civilization. Your intentions are irrelevant. Your nature is the issue. Ji-won felt rage building inside her, hot and fierce. She stepped to the edge of the platform, staring up at the council members. When she spoke, her voice was hard as steel. You're making a mistake. Yes, we have a violent past. Yes, we've done terrible things. But that's exactly why we're strong. We survived ice ages when we barely had fire. We survived plagues that killed half our population. We survived ourselves, our own worst impulses. We learned to cooperate despite our differences. We learned to dream of something better and then build it. She pointed at the council. You sit here in your ancient halls judging us from your position of safety and power. But let me tell you something. Exile won't break us. Hardship never has. It will forge us into something harder, something stronger. And one day when we return, you'll regret this decision. There will be no return, the cold voice stated. The exile is permanent. Jiwan smiled, but there was no humor in it. We'll see about that. The platform began to lower, carrying the human delegation back toward the docking bay. As they descended, Jiwan looked at her team. Yoon had tears running down his face. Daehyun's jaw was clenched tight with anger. But she saw something else in their eyes, too. Determination. Commander, Daehyun said quietly, what do we do now? Jiwan watched the council chamber disappear above them. Now we go home. We warn humanity, and we prepare for the longest journey we've ever taken. She paused, her expression hardening. And we remember every word they said here today, because someday, somehow, we will prove them wrong. The ship detached from HFY hours later, beginning its journey back to Earth. Behind them, the council went back to their deliberations, already forgetting about the angry primates they had just exiled. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. The trial of the Galactic Council took place on HFY, but the station had been transformed. The closed chamber where the council had once passed judgment in secret was now open, its proceedings broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. Billions of beings watched as the council members who had ruled for 50,000 years stood accused of crimes against civilization. Chancellor Min-jae Ryu presided over the proceedings. He had been elected as the first leader of the reformed Galactic Assembly, chosen specifically because he was not a military leader. Humanity needed to show the galaxy that they understood the difference between military power and political authority. Min-jae was a former teacher and philosopher, a man who had spent his life thinking about justice and ethics. He looked at the accused standing before him, Speaker Voth and the other council members who had ordered the exile of 47 species over the millennia. They looked diminished now, stripped of their power and authority. Some seemed defiant. Others appeared genuinely remorseful. All of them were afraid. You stand accused of crimes against galactic civilization, Min-jae said, his voice calm but carrying weight. Specifically the forced exile of 47 species, resulting in the deaths of trillions of sentient beings. The suppression of technological and social advancement across the galaxy, and the attempted destruction of the galaxy itself rather than surrender power. How do you answer these charges? Speaker Voth spoke for the group. The ancient crystalline being's voice was quieter than it had been, lacking its former authority. We did what we believed was necessary to maintain peace. The galaxy was in constant warfare before the Council established order. We saved countless lives. By destroying countless others, Ambassador Kyung Park said from her seat among the Assembly representatives. She was older now, wearing the weight of her responsibilities with grace. You exiled my ancestors' generation because you feared what humanity might become. You never gave us a chance to prove we could be peaceful. You judged us on our worst moments and ignored our potential for growth. Voth turned its faceted head toward her. And were we wrong? Look at you now. You conquered the galaxy in a matter of months. Your weapons are devastating. Your military power is absolute. You are everything we feared you would become. Min-jae stood up, drawing everyone's attention. That's exactly the point you're missing. Yes, humanity has incredible military power. Yes, we could have destroyed you and every species that opposed us. But we didn't. We chose to disable rather than destroy. We chose to capture rather than kill. We chose to heal rather than harm. That choice is what makes us different from you. He walked closer to the accused. You maintained peace through fear and oppression. You stifled growth because you were afraid of change. You exiled species not because they were evil, but because they were different. Humanity learned something in the void that you never understood. True strength isn't about eliminating threats. It's about helping others grow stronger alongside you. The trial continued for weeks. Evidence was presented from hundreds of sources. Representatives from the 23 surviving exiled species gave testimony about their suffering. The families of those who died in the void told their stories. Historians presented evidence of how the Council's technological restrictions had held back galactic progress for millennia. Through it all, Min-jae ensured the proceedings remained fair. The accused were given every opportunity to defend themselves. Evidence was examined carefully. Nothing was assumed without proof. Finally, the Assembly reached its verdict. The Council members were found guilty on all charges. The punishment, however, surprised many. You will not be executed, Minjay announced. You will not be tortured or exiled or disappeared. You will be imprisoned comfortably, with access to education, entertainment, and the opportunity to reflect on your actions. You will live out your natural lives in confinement, and we hope that in time, you will come to understand the suffering you caused and feel genuine remorse. In the gallery, representatives from various species erupted in protest. Many wanted harsher punishment, death, exile, something that matched the enormity of the crimes. Minjay raised his hand for silence. We could execute them. It would be emotionally satisfying. But then we would be no different from them. They responded to the threat of violence with exile and oppression. We will respond to actual violence with justice and mercy. This is how we break the cycle. The Velkar representative, a being named Tesh whose family had been torn apart during the attempted exile of his species, stood to speak. His voice trembled with emotion. My children were almost taken from me because your council feared our development of artificial intelligence. I wanted them to suffer as we suffered. But Chancellor Minjay is right. If we answer cruelty with cruelty, nothing changes. We just become the next council, waiting for someone to overthrow us in turn. The protest died down. The punishment stood, but the trial was just the beginning. The real work was rebuilding galactic civilization from the ground up. The reformed Galactic Assembly established new principles. No species could be exiled for technological development, social practices, or cultural differences. All species would have equal representation. Decisions would be made through democratic process, not authoritarian decree. And most importantly, the Assembly would actively encourage innovation and growth rather than suppress it. Humanity shared all its technology freely. The fold drives, the advanced shields, the medical treatments developed in the void. Everything was given to any species that wanted it. Some of the Assembly representatives questioned this generosity. Won't this eliminate our advantage? A counselor asked Minjay during a closed session. Minjay smiled. Our advantage never came from hoarding knowledge. It came from our willingness to take risks, to grow, to change. If we hoard what we've learned, we become exactly what we fought against. Besides, a galaxy where everyone is advancing together is stronger than one where we stand alone at the top. The 23 surviving exiled species were invited back into the galaxy. Humanity provided resources to help them rebuild. The Velkar, whose exile had been prevented at the last moment, became some of humanity's strongest allies. They understood what it meant to be judged unfairly and respected humanity for standing up against that injustice. 50 years passed. The galaxy transformed in ways that would have been unimaginable under the Council's rule. Species that had been held at a primitive technological level for millennia suddenly leaped forward, developing innovations the old Council would never have allowed. New forms of art and music spread across the stars. Philosophical movements emerged that questioned old assumptions and explored new possibilities. There were problems, of course. Some species struggled with the sudden freedom, making mistakes as they experimented with technologies they didn't fully understand. There were conflicts and disagreements. But the Assembly worked through these issues together, learning as they went. Chancellor Minjay stood on the observation deck of HFY one evening, now an old man approaching the end of his term. The station had been rebuilt as a symbol of the new galaxy, open and welcoming rather than closed and imposing. He watched ships from 1,000 different species arriving for the Assembly's annual gathering. Ambassador Kyung joined him. She too had aged, though she remained sharp and active. My great-grandmother would be proud, she said quietly. When the Council exiled humanity, they thought they were removing a threat. Instead, they created the species that would save the galaxy from stagnation. Do you think we've succeeded? Minjay asked. Have we really changed things, or will the Assembly eventually become just another council? Kyung considered the question carefully. That depends on future generations. We've given them tools and principles, but they have to choose to use them wisely. All we can do is set a good example and hope they learn from both our successes and our mistakes. Below them, in the Assembly chamber, representatives from over 1,000 species gathered to discuss the future. There were disagreements and debates, but everyone had a voice. Everyone had a chance to be heard. In a quiet corner of the station, in a museum dedicated to the history of the exile and return, a data crystal from the original progenitor archive was displayed. Visitors could activate it to hear the message the ancient species had left behind. The words echoed through the gallery. Evolution is not about perfection. It is about choosing, in each moment, to be better than you were. A young Velkar child listened to the message, her large eyes reflecting the crystal's glow. Her parent stood beside her, one of those who had almost been separated during the attempted exile. Are humans really that different from other species? The child asked. Her parent thought about the question. Not really. They can be violent and afraid just like anyone else. But they learned something important that took them thousands of years to understand. They learned that strength without compassion is just cruelty. That power without responsibility is just tyranny. That the strongest people aren't those who never fall, but those who rise again and help others up with them. The child looked at the ships arriving outside the window. I want to visit Earth someday, see where they came from. Supreme Commander Borum Yoon sat in the command chair of the flagship Eternal Return, watching the tactical display show 10,000 points of light spreading across the galaxy. Each point represented a human warship appearing simultaneously at strategic locations. The full drives had worked perfectly. In an instant, humanity had gone from absent to everywhere. All ships report successful transitions, her tactical officer announced. 0 casualties. All systems nominal. Borum allowed herself a small smile. The easy part was done. Now came the hard part. She was 58 years old and had trained her entire life for this moment. Every simulation, every drill, every strategic exercise had been building toward this day. But no amount of preparation could fully prepare someone for the weight of commanding an operation that would determine humanity's future and the fate of countless other species. Communications. Broadcast on all frequencies. Make sure every species in the galaxy hears this. Ambassador Kyung Park stepped forward. She was the great-granddaughter of Commander Ji-won Park, who had stood before the Council 700 years ago and promised they would regret their decision. Kyung looked remarkably like her ancestor, with the same determined expression and unwavering gaze. She spoke clearly into the recording device, her words being transmitted across the entire galaxy simultaneously. People of the Milky Way, we are humanity. 700 years ago, your Galactic Council judged us too dangerous to exist among you and exiled us beyond the galactic rim. They told us we would never return. They were wrong. Across the galaxy, billions of beings stopped what they were doing to listen to the unexpected broadcast. We have returned, but not as conquerors. We have returned as liberators. The Galactic Council has ruled through fear for 50,000 years, exiling species who dared to innovate, who dared to grow, who dared to be different. Today that ends. We call upon the Council to surrender their military assets and submit to trial for crimes against galactic civilization. You have 48 hours to comply. The message ended. For a moment there was silence across the galaxy. Then chaos erupted. The Council's response came within an hour. Their fleet, numbering over 100,000 ships, began mobilizing from dozens of staging areas. They had numbers on their side and 50 millennia of military experience. They were confident. They shouldn't have been. The first battle took place near the Council's largest military shipyard in the Deneb sector. 2,000 Council warships representing a dozen different species faced off against a single human battle group of 100 ships. Strike Leader Heun-jang commanded the human forces, and she had orders to disable, not destroy. All ships defensive formation. Wait for them to fire first, she commanded. The Council fleet opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams, missiles, kinetic weapons, and exotic weapons that bent space-time itself, all converged on the human position. It was enough firepower to vaporize a small planet. The human shields didn't even flicker. Heun watched her tactical display as enemy weapons simply vanished into her ship's shields, the energy being absorbed and stored. Return fire. Precision strikes only. Disable their propulsion and weapon systems. Human weapons, refined over centuries of desperate innovation in the void, struck with surgical precision. Each shot was perfectly calculated to disable without killing. Council warships found their engines suddenly dead, their weapons offline, their shields collapsed. Not a single ship was destroyed. Not a single life was lost. But the entire fleet was rendered helpless in less than 17 minutes. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. At every location where Council forces gathered, human ships appeared and systematically dismantled their opposition without casualties. The message was clear. Humanity could destroy the Council's military completely if they chose to, but they were choosing mercy instead. Strike Leader, Heian's forces moved from system to system, always giving Council ships the chance to surrender first. Most chose to fight. All of them lost. But all of them survived, their crews rescued and treated well, their ships disabled but repairable. Supreme Commander Borum watched the reports coming in from all fronts. Everything was proceeding according to plan, but she felt no satisfaction. This display of force was necessary, but it troubled her. They were trying to prove they had grown beyond violence by being overwhelmingly good at violence. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from HFY, her communications officer announced. "It's the Council. They want to negotiate. Patch it through." The image that appeared showed the Council's eldest member, Speaker Voth. The crystalline being had been ancient when humanity was first exiled and looked even older now. Its voice resonated with age and barely contained fear. "Humanity, we acknowledge your military superiority. What are your terms?" Borum leaned forward. "Complete disarmament of all Council military forces. Dissolution of the Galactic Council. Formation of a new governing body with representatives from all species, including those you exiled. And trials for those who ordered the exile and oppression of innocent species." Voth's crystalline form seemed to shiver. "You ask us to dismantle 50,000 years of order. The galaxy will descend into chaos." "The galaxy has been in chaos," Ambassador Kyung interjected. "You just didn't notice because you were comfortable. Real order doesn't require forcing people to obey through fear. Real order comes from cooperation and mutual respect." "And if we refuse?" Voth asked. "Then we will remove your military capability by force and impose these terms anyway," Borum said flatly. "But many more of your people will be hurt in the process. Surrender now and we can begin the transition peacefully." There was a long silence. Then Voth spoke again. "The Council needs time to deliberate. You have until the deadline Ambassador Park gave you. After that we proceed with or without your cooperation." The transmission ended. Borum turned to her senior staff. "They're not going to surrender peacefully. Prepare for assault on HFY, but remember, minimal casualties. We're not here to slaughter them." She was right. The 48-hour deadline passed with no response from the Council. Human forces began their final push toward the galactic core, where HFY orbited a massive black hole. Council forces threw everything they had at the advancing humans, using tactics and weapons accumulated over millennia. Nothing worked. Human technology, forged in the desperate struggle to survive in the void, was simply too advanced. Shields held against impossible odds. Weapons struck with perfect accuracy. Full drives allowed human ships to appear and disappear at will, making traditional battle lines meaningless. Strike Leader Heian led the final assault on HFY itself. Her team of elite soldiers, using powered armor that made them nearly invincible, infiltrated the massive station. Their orders were clear: secure the Council chambers, prevent any attempts to destroy the station, and capture the Council members alive. The infiltration should have been impossible. HFY had been designed to be impregnable, protected by security systems built over 50,000 years. But humanity had studied the station during their reconnaissance missions, and they knew its weaknesses. Heian and her team moved through the corridors like ghosts, their armor's stealth systems making them nearly invisible. They encountered resistance, but their weapons were set to stun. Council guards dropped unconscious, to wake up later with headaches but otherwise unharmed. They reached the Council chamber just as Speaker Voth was about to activate something that made Heian's blood run cold. Her armor's sensors identified it immediately. A doomsday device, capable of triggering the black hole at the galaxy's center to expand and consume everything within 100,000 light-years. They'd rather destroy the galaxy than lose control. Heian whispered in horror. She moved faster than she had ever moved before. Her armor augmented her speed, turning her into a blur of motion. She crossed the chamber in seconds and physically tore the activation console away from Voth's crystalline appendages. The device powered down with a dying whine. "It's over," Heian said, breathing hard. "Stand down." Voth looked at her with ancient eyes that held something like relief beneath the fear. "Perhaps it is better this way. We have been old for too long." Within hours, Supreme Commander Borum Yoon stood in the Council chamber, the same place where humanity had been judged and exiled 700 years before. But now Council members were being led away in restraints, their power broken forever. Ambassador Kyung looked at the empty seats and felt a strange mix of emotions. My great-grandmother stood in this room and promised we would return. I wish she could see this. She can, Borum said quietly. Everyone who suffered through the exile, who died in the void, who never gave up hope. They're all here with us now. This victory belongs to them. Across the galaxy, word spread quickly. Humanity had defeated the Galactic Council. The old order was broken. A new age was about to begin. And most importantly, it had been done with minimal bloodshed. Humanity had proven they could be both strong and merciful, powerful and compassionate. The galaxy would never be the same again.